Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marylène Lévesque. In the year 2020, the body of 22-year-old Marylène Lévesque was discovered with multiple stab wounds, sparking a massive public outcry. The community was outraged, demanding that Canadian authorities provide an explanation for how such a heinous crime could have occurred. Marylène was born in 1997 in Chicoutimi, Quebec, to Corinne Lévesque and François Goulet, who separated soon after her birth. Those close to her described her as kind, outgoing, and always friendly. Marylène grew up partly with her mother and partly in foster homes. She left her hometown for Quebec City at the age of 17 and returned after a breakup with her boyfriend. From then on, she commuted between the two cities, working in Quebec City 2 or 3 days a week and taking the bus or carpool services since she didn't have a driver's license. By early 2020, Marylène was living with her new boyfriend Gabriel Truchon in the Chicoutimi district, about 130 miles from Quebec City. Gabriel said Marylène dreamed of a stable life and wanted to pursue a career in architecture. Tragically, on January 22, 2020, everything changed. Marylène was in Quebec City for work, while Gabriel stayed in Chicoutimi. At around 9 p.m., Gabriel became worried when he couldn't reach Marylène after several attempts to contact her. He then texted her co-workers, hoping someone had seen her. Soon, Gabriel received a call from an unknown number. The caller, identifying himself as a police officer, told Gabriel that Marylène had been found dead. Forensic experts later determined that she died from multiple stab wounds, with more than 50 wounds on her body. To continue with Marylène's story, let's go back 17 years. In 2003, Chantal Deschênes, a 32-year-old bartender at a Quebec hotel, met Eustachio Galese, her 36-year-old boss, who oversaw the hotel's guest meals. Soon after, Chantal and Eustachio started a passionate romance. At the time, Chantal was a single mother of 2 girls, aged 10 and 6, whose father she had not lived with for several years. Eustachio, on the other hand, had been married to Joanne Lafront since 1996 and had 3 children with her. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by instances of physical violence. For instance, Eustachio would occasionally smash walls in their home during fits of anger. On one occasion, while traveling through Ottawa, he assaulted his wife and was arrested, spending 7 days in jail. Despite these incidents and other forms of verbal abuse, Joanne Lafront claimed she wasn't afraid of her husband, describing him as a good father to their children, although his demanding job often kept him from spending time with the family. When Eustachio began his romance with Chantal, he left his wife Joanne and their 3 children to move in with his new love. The whirlwind relationship was soon formalized, and Chantal and Eustachio got married. At first, everything seemed perfect for the couple, as is often the case. Eustachio got along great with Chantal's kids, and they spent their weekends together, going to the movies, skating, and enjoying other activities. However, the relationship began to unravel as quickly as it had started. Meanwhile, Eustachio was working over 60 hours a week as the food and beverage manager at the hotel. He warned his supervisors he would quit on December 31, 2004, due to the unbearable job pressures, but he didn't confide in his employer about his personal struggles. Eustachio Galese and Chantal Deschênes had a highly complex and often volatile relationship. According to recent accounts from witnesses, Galese was intensely jealous, while others claimed that both partners were possessive and frequently argued about it. Friends close to the couple revealed that Galese would sometimes shout, but never physically harmed Chen, who would often retaliate by insulting or even slapping him. The tension in the relationship climaxed on October 21, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's 2 daughters were still asleep, having spent the evening with Joanie Hion, their babysitter, who slept over at their house because their mother worked the night shift. From the couple's conversation, Joanie learned of the night's argument between them. The babysitter left the house around 7:15 a.m., and the children were supposed to go to school around 8 a.m. Before leaving for school, the girls went in to greet their mother, who was in the bedroom with Eustachio. It was the last time they saw their mother alive. At 1:29 p.m., Eustachio Galese went to his ex-wife Joanna Lafrance's home to drop off his cash savings. While there, he called the police and confessed to killing his wife, Chantal. 10 minutes later, at 1:39 p.m., the police arrived at Joanna's home, where Galese repeated his confession and surrendered. Galese urged the police to hurry to the school before Chantal's two daughters returned home and discovered their mother's body. Meanwhile, the police went to Chantal's home, where they found her bloody body on the bed in her bedroom. Next to the body, they found two blood-stained knives and a broken hammer. An autopsy revealed that Chantal died from multiple hammer blows and stab wounds. The hammer blows were so brutal that the handle broke. In 2006, a jury found Galese guilty of second-degree murder during his trial. He admitted that he killed Chantal because she had decided to leave him. Galese was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Galese had a history of violent behavior towards his partners. In 1997, he was jailed for 7 days for assaulting his first wife, Joanne Lafrance. Tragically, he went on to kill his second wife, Chantal Dechaine, in 2004. This pattern of behavior suggests that Galese had a tendency to abuse women. Despite this disturbing history, the parole board to release him in March 2019, concluding that his risk of reoffending was low. As a condition of his parole, Galese was permitted to date women to meet his sexual needs, but with strict limitations. His parole officer set rules for his interactions with women, allowing him to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month, but prohibiting romantic relationships. Additionally, he was required to observe a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. unless attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. However, Galese struggled to abide by these rules, frequently visiting the massage parlor several times a week instead of just once a month. In March 2019, Galese was released. Later, in June, the 51-year-old visited an erotic massage parlor where he met 22-year-old Marylène Lévesque, an employee. Although Marylène's family knew she earned a living by providing intimate services, she rarely discussed it with them, and when she did, it was often in a light-hearted or joking manner. Those close to her described her as sensitive. However, she had become rigid about her job, and her relatives believed part of her wanted to change her life and quit. Yet, it's not easy to revert to minimum wage after becoming accustomed to earning the equivalent of 2 weeks' work in just 2 hours. How did Marylène end up in prostitution? The circumstances are unclear, but one thing is certain: her childhood was difficult. She was placed in foster homes repeatedly. Marylène's boyfriend and close friends were aware of her workplace and the nature of her job. According to a friend, Marylène didn't have conflicting feelings about her profession. She openly discussed it without pride or shame. Since she worked in Quebec, 100 miles from their home, her boyfriend didn't object to her occupation. Galese, who was largely left to his own devices, began visiting a massage parlor multiple times a week. Although he seemed reformed to the parole board, his fundamental nature remained unchanged. On several occasions, he became violent towards female employees, resulting in him being banned from the establishment. Unbeknownst to the staff, Galese was a convicted criminal who had served time in prison for murdering his wife. In late summer 2019, when it was discovered that Galese had assaulted multiple women at a massage parlor, the parole board prohibited him from visiting erotic massage parlors, warning him that he would face imprisonment if he didn't comply. However, by then, Galese had developed romantic feelings for Marylène and found a way to bypass the rules. He offered her $1,300 Canadian to meet him in a hotel room, which she accepted. This was their first encounter outside of a massage parlor, and it happened without any issues. Galese felt deeply sympathetic towards Marylène, so he started opening up to her about his emotional struggles. He shared with her how much he still missed his late wife, whom he had mourned for 15 years. But he didn't reveal that he was responsible for her death. After this, Galese began to sense that Marylène was distancing herself from him, and their connection was deteriorating. He felt rejected, which sparked anxiety and jealousy within him. Galese scheduled another hotel meeting with Marylène for January 22, 2020. Marylène told her boyfriend that she generally avoided hotel meetings, preferring massage parlors instead, as they had guards to protect the workers from potential issues and to escort troublesome clients out. However, the attractive offer of $2,000 convinced Marylène to agree to another hotel meeting. Around 8:30 p.m., after dinner, the couple went to their hotel room. At 11:35 p.m., Galese arrived at the police station and, similar to his 2004 case, confessed to murdering Marylène. The police rushed to the hotel, hoping to find Marylène still alive. Unfortunately, she had already been killed. The autopsy revealed 57 stab wounds on her body. It was determined that Galese had spent about 2 hours at a bar before surrendering to the police, during which time he got rid of the murder weapon and Marylène's cell phone. A terrible event occurred, but it was made even more distressing by the perpetrator's identity, past, and the circumstances surrounding his latest atrocity, sparking widespread outrage and demands for answers from the authorities. Bill Blair, the Secretary of Public Safety, expressed his condolences to Marylène's family and stated that her death was preventable. Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Lebel sought an explanation for how a violent criminal like Galese was granted parole and questioned whether the officers involved had sufficient training to assess public safety risks. She also called on Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair to investigate the situation. An investigation commission was established to examine the parole board's actions and found deficiencies in their work, case management, and supervision of the offender. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada described Marylène's death as a terrible tragedy that should never have occurred, promising that the Correctional Service of Canada, in collaboration with the parole board, would take significant steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Despite the high-profile comments, no one faced serious punishment in the end. Some staff members from the parole board were reassigned to different roles, while others were sent for additional training. Unfortunately, there is no way to bring back the young woman who lost her life. It is hoped that her tragic death will make decision-makers think twice about the serious consequences of their actions. As part of a settlement agreement between the authorities and the victim's family, the government provided compensation for her death, which prevented a lawsuit from being filed by her relatives. The amount of compensation remains undisclosed due to confidentiality agreements. It's worth noting that some people even blamed the victim for her own death because of her profession. Galese was initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder after it was revealed that he had planned the crime in advance and purchased the knife beforehand. Galese admitted his guilt, confessing that he had deliberately planned the murder. During his trial in February 2020, the prosecutor argued that Galese's motivation for the crime was jealousy, resulting from his realization that Marylène was using him for financial gain. On February 27, 2020, the 51-year-old Eustachio Galese was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. This time, he will be eligible to apply for parole, but not until he has served 25 years, unlike the 15-year requirement following the murder of his wife. Do you think Galese will be released again if he lives to be 76 years old? Share your thoughts. The case of Paula Ortega. In early 2023, the city of Sangolquí in Ecuador's Pichincha region was rocked by a tragic incident. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that shocked the community, but its motive, a mere $600 theft. Could the life of 37-year-old Paula Ortega Alcocer really be valued at just $600? Born in March 1986, Paula was the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figueroa Lara School and later attended the Polytechnic University, where she developed a keen interest in the hospitality industry. After her studies, Paula actively contributed to the growth of her family's business, which specialized in party goods manufacturing. The Ortega Alcocer family was well-to-do and renowned in Sangolquí and neighboring Ecuadorian towns. Paula's father, in his youth, began building a business supplying party goods across Ecuador. The venture became quite successful, enabling him to start his own production of balloons, piñatas, and other festive paraphernalia. This expansion led to the opening of several stores. The Alcocer family's party shops were located not only in Sangolquí, but also in Ecuador's capital, Quito. Each family member played a role in the development and maintenance of their enterprise. The father expanded the main production line, opening new workshops for balloons, garlands, caps, and various party items. Each of the three children managed a store, tailoring it to their vision. Paula's entrepreneurial spirit led her beyond just managing a store. She organized a party planning service within the company, which turned out to be a great success. It seemed Paula had found her calling, bringing joy to people, which made her truly happy. While the business ventures of the Ortega family flourished for a long time, unfortunately, Paula Ortega's personal life was not as successful. Despite her youthful and joyous demeanor, she faced significant hardships in her private life. Paula's first marriage to Carlos Pedro turned out to be unhappy. After the birth of their daughter, Carlos developed an alcohol addiction. He began disappearing from home and stealing money from Paula's store. His infidelity was the last straw, leading Paula to end the marriage and find herself alone with her daughter. This period was particularly challenging for Paula, as she lost hope in finding personal happiness. However, the psychological support of her family and her passion for her work helped her regain a sense of normalcy in her life. A decade later, Paula met Christian Diego, a tall, dark-haired, and handsome man. Christian was 4 years younger than Paula. Having lost faith in finding a worthy partner, Paula was cautious with the persistent young suitor. Christian proved to be calm and reliable, quickly bonding with Paula's daughter, which greatly impressed Paula. After 2 years of relationship, her heart warmed to him, leading to a beautiful wedding ceremony. Christian embraced Paula's daughter as his own, and they soon welcomed another daughter, Maria. Christian and Paula spent 5 years together, with Christian fully integrating into Paula's father's company. He was entrusted with finding locations for new stores, which often kept him away from home. Coming from a modest working-class family, Christian had always dreamed of owning a large business. Unfortunately, some people can conceal their dark sides so well that one might live for years alongside ruthless criminals without suspecting a thing. However, the truth eventually comes to light when evil erupts in the most unexpected ways. Paula Ortega and her husband, Christian, appeared to be the epitome of a happy, successful couple to their family, friends, and neighbors. However, this perception was only surface deep. In 2000, Paula's father passed away after a long illness. His death not only devastated the family, but also turned their business upside down. Christian, driven by a desire for power and the wealth it brought, eagerly sought to take Paula's father's place in the business. However, his lack of skill led to one failed deal after another. As a result, Christian began to vent his frustration on his family. Initially in secret, but later openly, he began to abandon his family, indulging in a life of debauchery. Women and alcohol became his escape into a world of pleasure and recklessness. With Paula's father no longer there to restrain him, Christian's true nature began to surface. Having already experienced a traumatic marriage, Paula refused to endure this behavior again. The couple's home became a battleground of endless scandals, revealing Christian's true nature as an ambitious egotist, craving only power and unquestioned obedience. After a particularly nasty argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce, fearing her husband's reaction. The news of this drastically changed Christian's behavior. Unwilling to lose his place in the successful family, he stopped his outrageous conduct and appeared to transform for the better. He expressed remorse, claiming to be caught up in a whirlwind of confusion, and professed his love and value for his family. His eloquence persuaded Paula, Not wanting to be alone again, she gave him a second chance. In a gesture of reconciliation, Christian suggested organizing a romantic dinner at their home. Paula agreed. She sent their daughters to her parents' house and began preparing for the evening. Inside, she was aflutter with excitement. Deep down, she still dreamed of a happy, strong family and was doing everything she could to preserve it. The evening at the Ortega home was one of celebration and comfort. The living room was lit up with festive garlands, and the dining table was warmly illuminated by the yellow glow of candles. Christian uncorked a bottle of dry white wine while Paula served a hot meal. The night could have been genuinely reconciliatory, had it not been for a sudden proposal from Christian that disrupted the peace. Christian, a co-owner of the Alcazar company, revealed to his wife a significant misstep. In his pursuit to replace Paula's father and gain full control, he had made a costly mistake in an important tender, leading to substantial losses for the company. Now, the firm desperately needed a new investor, implying that a part of the company would officially change hands. Paula was adamantly against this, believing her father's business should remain a family affair. Despite Christian's persuasion, she stood her ground, infuriating him. He had already found an investor and was eager to complete the deal without complications. Their dinner, and by extension their relationship, soured. January 2nd, 2023, seemed like any other day. Paula took her younger daughter to the playroom before heading to her shop for work. She had a large order to prepare, involving assembling balloon fountains and party decorations for a themed event. During her lunch break, 2 men knocked on the shop's door. Although closed, Paula opened it, expecting a courier to pick up the balloon bouquets. The men, slim and dressed identically as if they were twins, startled her with their dark hoodies. They lingered, scanning the shop before splitting up. As Paula called out to them, stating the shop was closed for lunch, they cornered her against the wall. The tension of this silent scene was broken by a knock on the glass door. The men hastily exited the shop. A smiling young courier arrived, unwittingly rescuing Paula from the unknown assailants. Shaken, Paula handed over the package, closed the shop, and with trembling hands, called her mother. She was visibly frightened, a sentiment she expressed over the phone. Paula's mother suggested reporting the unsettling incident at her shop to the police, but Paula declined, attributing her reaction to mere fright since nothing harmful had actually occurred. She didn't reopen her shop that day, her thoughts consumed by Christian's actions and the identity and motives of the 2 mysterious men. Seeking solace, Paula decided to take a stroll through the city. She stopped at a nearby cafe for some coffee, walked through the park to breathe in the fresh air, and then visited her sister. Over cups of fragrant tea, they engaged in a heart-to-heart conversation. Overwhelmed by the day's shocking events, Paula confided in her sister not only about the scary encounter at her shop, but also about the difficulties in her marriage. She shared how Christian had drastically changed after her father's passing, indulging in alcohol and openly being unfaithful. Paula chose not to mention his proposal about merging the company with a new investor, as she habitually kept her personal struggles to herself. But that day, her emotions overpowered her pride and shame over tolerating such demeaning treatment. He's a peculiar being. My sister was lively, happy, cheerful, enterprising, hardworking, an extremely gentle and kind mother. She should have been receiving energy from him, Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, would later say. Paula spoke of her long-term life plans, her desire for her daughters to grow up and become professionals, and her intention to continue her business. She was selfless and tirelessly hardworking, Adriana recalled. After her emotional talk with her sister, Paula headed home. A phone call from Christian interrupted her. He was picking up their daughter from the playroom and would come to the shop to pick her up as well. His hurried speech was interspersed with children's voices. Paula didn't get a chance to tell him about the frightening incident at her shop, especially since she suspected him to be involved. Reluctantly, Paula returned to work, once again prioritizing her family's well-being over her own. She didn't have to wait long. Christian arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had wanted to go home, and he couldn't deny his little princess. He informed Paula that the girls were at home and eagerly waiting for hamburgers for dinner. In what has become a modern family tradition, Christian took Paula not to the nearest fast food joint, but to a restaurant courtyard at a shopping center, several blocks from their home. Parking the car beside a secluded wall and locking it securely, he left Paula inside to collect their order. Relaxing in the passenger seat after a taxing day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the impending danger. Shortly, she recognized two familiar figures near the car, talking loudly and circling the vehicle. Recognizing them as the unexpected visitors from her shop, Paula tried to stay calm, trusting that the car was secure and Christian would return soon. Suddenly, the car's lights flashed and the door locks disengaged. In a panic, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms, but she was trapped with no escape. One intruder casually got into the driver's seat while the other joined him in the back, pinning Paula down even more. She felt something warm trickling down her arm before darkness enveloped her. Paula sustained 11 knife wounds to her neck and 2 to her face. After the brutal attack, the assailants fled the scene, leaving Paula alone and gravely injured. Christian returned just 7 minutes later to a horrific sight. The car's interior was drenched in blood. Frantically, he called emergency services, but struggled to clearly communicate the situation and give emergency coordinates. He then called Paula's mother to report the attack before driving to the hospital himself. Tragically, Paula succumbed to her injuries in the emergency room, passing away before receiving necessary medical attention. Christian, overwhelmed by grief and shock at the loss of his wife, reacted with loud cries and throwing chairs in the waiting room. The sudden violent end of Paula Ortega left a community in shock and a family in profound grief, raising questions about the motive and identity of the attackers. The initial theory of the prosecution was a violent end inflicted during a robbery. It was later discovered that $600 and a gold necklace were missing from Paula's purse. This began an investigation. The prosecution's theory was confirmed when footage from city cameras showed 2 unknown men who had visited Paula's store earlier that day in the vicinity. Both were in hoodies, making it impossible to create a clear image of their faces, and their vague descriptions provided no clarity. 2 months after the tragic event, Paula's family demanded justice. But the investigation was at a standstill. A turning point came when Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, gave testimony casting doubt on Christian's innocence. She informed the investigators about a conversation she had with Paula on the day of the incident. Adriana also mentioned that Christian regularly committed infidelity and domestic violence against Paula, who was contemplating divorce. This provided a perfect motive, as Christian, driven by ambition, could not afford to lose his wealth and status in the event of a divorce. The prosecution investigated this angle. During a search of their home, incriminating messages were found on Christian's phone, indicating multiple affairs and turbulent marital relations. A critical piece of evidence was documentation prepared for the transfer of the company to a private individual, which Paula had refused to sign. Following these revelations, the incident was investigated as a suspected homicide. As the prosecution continued to gather information implicating Christian Diego, new evidence emerged, unraveling the complex web of the couple's relationship. 2 weeks after the incident, we found out he transferred $2,000 to an unknown woman's account, said Adriana, Paula's sister, adding another layer of suspicion to the already convoluted case. The most shocking aspect, as claimed by relatives, was that Christian made a payment using Paula's account while she was dying from her injuries. Instead of immediately helping his gravely wounded wife, Christian seemingly bided his time. Investigations confirmed this information. The identity of the woman who received the transfer from Christian that day was established as 28-year-old Laura Castillo. Urgently summoned for questioning, she revealed that she had noticed her bank card missing a couple of days earlier, but didn't think much of it, as her brother often used her card. The electronic payment records showed a transfer of $2,000 from Christian on January 2nd at 20:05. However, Laura denied any acquaintance with Christian. Her solid alibi at the time of the incident absolved her of any involvement. She was released, and the investigation hit a dead end again. Days later, Laura returned to the police, stating her brother had returned the bank card, as she had suspected. She provided a full description of her brother's appearance, which matched one of the criminals caught on surveillance cameras near the car. In the chaos of fleeing the crime scene, one attacker forgot to pull up his hood. The identities of Byron and Mortines Castillo, two repeat offenders with a substantial criminal history, were established. The brothers were apprehended. But what could possibly link two seasoned criminals to a seemingly respectable and successful family man? Further investigation revealed that the attacks on Paula had been carried out repeatedly by the Castillo brothers. But why were these repeat offenders targeting this young woman? On December 8, 2022, Paula Ortega faced a harrowing incident at a gas station when her car was stolen. Distracted by a young man, his accomplice quickly jumped behind the wheel and sped off. Fortunately, her daughters weren't in the car that day. Surveillance footage identified the two familiar culprits. Coincidentally, on the day of the theft, Paula unknowingly came face to face with her future assailant. However, the car theft case took an unexpected turn when Christian intervened, claiming the thieves had contacted him. He met with them and retrieved all of Paula's personal belongings, including her wallet. This development cast further doubt on Christian's innocence. Seasoned investigators were puzzled by the widower's boldness in shielding the criminals. Surveillance cameras played a crucial role in identifying the carjackers. As Christian realized he was under suspicion, he concocted a new defense narrative involving extortion by two criminal brothers demanding a large sum of money. But before he could deploy his version of events, the police executed a swift interrogation strategy. Separating the suspects and suggesting one had confessed, they obtained a confession from Martin Castillo. He admitted that more than 2 months earlier, Christian had paid them $2,000 to murder his wife, promising another $2,000 after the deed. During a reenactment, Martin demonstrated how he inflicted 11 fatal knife wounds on the terrified woman. Realizing the crime was uncovered, he remorselessly divulged all details of their arrangement with Christian. Martin revealed that the car theft and the attack on Paula's shop were also parts of Christian's plan to pressure her. By chance, Paula lived a few hours longer than intended. On November 29, 2023, all 3 suspects appeared in court. The prosecution presented a comprehensive picture of the murder day, pieced together from various sources. Videos from surveillance cameras in the area where Christian parked the car, subjected to audio and video forensic analysis, unveiled a chilling, soul-freezing narrative. In chilling surveillance footage, Christian Diego is seen exiting his car and heading towards a shopping center elevator. Moments later, he remotely unlocks his car from half a block away, allowing 2 assailants to enter the vehicle and attack Paula. The prosecutor's report noted Christian's odd behavior post-attack, repeatedly looking back, approaching the car, pausing, returning, pacing back and forth, and making phone calls. Surprisingly, upon finding his wife bleeding profusely, he showed no shock or urgency to help her, instead driving her to a distant hospital. Christian's actions, meticulously reconstructed from surveillance videos, particularly in the first 4 minutes after Paula's attack, were cold and calculating. As she bled in the car but was still alive, Christian, standing nearby, callously transferred money to his accomplices for the assault. Paula's family lawyers urged the court to consider these videos as aggravating factors in the crime. The reconstructed sequence of events presented in court proves the crime was premeditated. Hours before the attack, around 1:30 p.m., 2 individuals entered Paula's store, dropped off nearby by Christian. This implies the crime was intended to occur earlier, during the lunchtime closure, when Paula was alone. Prosecutor Marylène Calderon highlighted inconsistencies. How did the assailants know the couple would be at the eatery if they weren't tailing them? Yet they arrived on time to commit the crime. Christian's actions, not fully raising the car window, unlocking the doors near the eatery, his 1,000 times pacing before aiding his wife, phone calls, and not seeking immediate medical attention at a nearby clinic, are key evidence for charging him with orchestrating the femicide. Femicide, defined as the intentional murder of a woman simply because she is a woman, was a central theme in the trial of Christian and Paula Ortega's troubled relationship. Shockingly present in today's society, this hate crime was exemplified through Christian's younger age, which seemed to fuel his contempt and abuse towards Paula. Despite her success, Paula lived in a metaphorical golden cage, masking and enabling her husband's tyrannical behavior, allowing him to assert dominance. Years of silence culminated in Christian's sinister plot to seize control of Paula's thriving party empire and gain sole guardianship of their daughter, Maria. Testimonies from over 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, alongside thorough examination of internal and external family communications, revealed Christian's true motives and objectives. Without legal signing rights, he sought to coerce Paula into transferring her company shares. However, his plan failed. Christian didn't physically harm Paula but inflicted severe psychological abuse, artfully concealed under the guise of a perfect family life. According to the Prosecutor General's report, video evidence led to Christian's preventive isolation as the crime's orchestrator. This measure isn't an arrest but a strategy to neutralize a societal threat. Following this action, Christian planned to flee. In the high-profile case against Christian Diego, accused of orchestrating his wife's demise, his defense team worked tirelessly to portray him as a victim. However, they were unable to refute crucial evidence like surveillance footage and falsified company transfer documents. Desperate, the defense then attempted to depict the accused as suffering from a mental disorder, citing episodes of sudden rage. Multiple psychiatrists evaluated Christian, but he was declared competent. His defense counsel, realizing the gravity of the situation, advised Christian to flee the country, asking if his passport was ready and suggesting he buy a ticket to Panama for the next day. However, this plan to escape justice failed. Christian's search for Central American flight tickets raised alarm bells with the authorities. The prosecutor swiftly ordered an 8-hour detainment of Christian Diego, followed by charges and the disclosure of case details to a judge specializing in domestic violence cases. Pending trial, the suspect was held in preliminary detention, pursued as the alleged mastermind behind a heinous act that left 2 young children motherless and an entire family grieving an irreplaceable loss. The Ortega family demands justice for this atrocious crime, emphasizing the devastating impact on the children and their irreplaceable loss. In a case that gripped public attention, the jury concluded that Christian and his 2 accomplices were guilty of a meticulously planned, intentional act of extreme brutality. The unremorseful Christian and his associates were sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Rumiñahui expressed their solidarity with the tragic loss of Paula Alcocer. The institution extends its deepest sympathies to the family and friends affected by this incident. The unfortunate demise of this esteemed businesswoman, friend, mother, and wife, who contributed significantly to the canton's development and brought prosperity to those in her circle, is deeply mourned. Their statement read, Paula's case emerged as a prominent instance of violence against women, following the Latin American Association for Alternative Development's report of 332 fatalities due to gender-based violence in 2022. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers, a beloved principal in Bakersfield, California, was informed that on Tuesday, July 8, 2003, his wife, children, and mother-in-law were tragically found murdered in their home. Despite the house being ransacked, nothing was taken, leading the police to rule out robbery and suspect intentional homicide. Vincent was cleared as he had a solid alibi, proving he was out of town during the incident. Subsequent investigations revealed a disturbing truth that shocked the entire community: the chilling case of Vincent Brothers. Born on May 30, 1962, in Beeport, Long Island, New York, Vincent was known for his charm, reliability, and hard work from a young age. He had also served in the Marine Reserves after graduating from Norfolk State University. Moving to California in the mid-80s for further studies, he eventually earned his master's degree. Vincent had a tumultuous past with relationships, despite rising quickly as a school administrator. He had 2 brief marriages that ended in separation. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, he had a daughter with his then-girlfriend. He filed a lawsuit to establish paternity and eventually gained custody and visitation rights. initially ordered to pay $350 monthly for support. This amount was raised to $771 by 2003. In the same year, he faced legal consequences, receiving a 6-day jail sentence and probation for a misdemeanor charge of spousal abuse. In 1992, Vincent entered another marriage, which also ended abruptly after allegations of threats to kill and physical abuse by his second wife. She filed for divorce in 1996. Allegations have been made against Vincent, who was the vice principal at Emerson Middle School, for sexual misconduct towards a colleague. The woman reported instances of harassment, including an incident at his home where Vincent physically assaulted her and prevented her from contacting the authorities by taking her phone. She tried to report the incident to the police but felt discouraged, as Vincent was a respected member of the community, which made her doubt if her report would be taken seriously. The harassment continued with inappropriate touching at the school's front counter, leading the woman to take a leave of absence due to the hostile work environment. As the intimidation escalated to threatening phone calls, the school district investigated the claims and warned Vincent about the possibility of career consequences if found true. Despite denying the accusations and having a clean disciplinary record, the school administration decided to transfer Vincent to another school after their investigation. Vincent worked at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California. He was well liked for his routine of walking students home safely after school. While at Fremont Elementary, he met Joni Harper, the campus security supervisor. They began dating and got married after their first child, Marquise, was born. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. Unfortunately, their marriage was annulled in September 2001 due to Vincent's infidelity. In 2003, Vincent and Joni secretly remarried, and 4 months later, their third-born child, Marshall, was born. However, Joni soon confided to friends that their marriage was facing issues once again. This time, she expressed fear that Vincent might try to harm her. Joni, a loving mother of 3, lived with her husband, her mother Ernestine Harper, and their children in Bakersfield, California. They were known in their community as a joyful and involved family, actively engaging in community events and maintaining amicable connections with others. Joni worked as a basketball official, while her mother was recognized for her advocacy as a civil rights activist. Outsiders perceived Vincent and Joni's marriage as solid, unaware of the tragic events that would unfold. Vincent had already moved out of the house in April, 3 months before the incident, due to frequent conflicts with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On Sunday, July 6, 2003, Joni, along with her 3 children, Marquez, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, and her mother, Ernestine Harper, attended a morning church service. After the service, they went for lunch at the Black Angus restaurant before returning home. Once home, they took a nap before planning to attend the evening church service. In a horrifying sequence of events, Joni and her children were in one bedroom, while her mother occupied another area of the house, when they were ruthlessly and fatally attacked. There were no apparent signs of forced entry, and the assailant breached the house and initiated the assault by firing 2 shots at Joni's head in her bedroom, followed by targeting Lindsay in the center of her back. Ernestine, likely alerted by the noise, moved towards the hallway to investigate, but she was fatally shot twice in the face, collapsing in the hallway just outside her bedroom. Returning to Joni's room, the attacker proceeded to shoot Marquez and delivered a final fatal shot to the baby's back. Each gunshot was strategically aimed to ensure fatal harm. The assailant, rather than immediately fleeing, went to the kitchen, retrieved a knife from the butcher block, and viciously stabbed Joni multiple times in the back. The assailant then tampered with the TV connections, but placed the TV carefully on the ground. Additionally, Joni's purse was emptied onto the laundry room floor, yet nothing valuable was taken, including money that was left untouched. It appeared the assailant aimed to mislead the authorities, creating the impression of a break-in and seeking to eliminate any potential witnesses. Afterward, the assailant covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. On July 8, 2003, Joni's closest friend, Kelsey Spann, grew concerned as she hadn't heard from Joni, her mother, or the children since they attended church that Sunday. Worried that something might have happened, Kelsey decided to visit Joni's home to check on them, using the key Joni had entrusted to her. Kelsey attempted to unlock the side door, but found it difficult to do so, as something was preventing it from opening. She proceeded to the back of the house and discovered an unlocked sliding glass door, which was an unusual occurrence. Upon entering, she made the grisly discovery of Joni, Ernestine, Marquise, Lindsay, and Marshall, all deceased. Acting swiftly, Kelsey contacted the authorities at 7 a.m., prompting their arrival at the horrifying scene where the 5 individuals had been brutally murdered. The peaceful ranch-style residence where Joni, her children, and mother resided sat in a tranquil corner lot within the neighborhood. Law enforcement concluded that the family was tragically killed on a Sunday afternoon following their return from church. Detectives assessed the situation, identifying Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries. They inferred that the assailant's actions indicated profound anger. The police expressed concern for Vincent's safety and discovered that he had traveled to Ohio. Detective Watts, one of the detectives, traveled to North Carolina as Vincent and his brother Melvin had gone there to visit their mother. Upon interacting with Vincent in North Carolina, the police found him in a traumatized state, deeply distressed, and unable to articulate coherent sentences, which did not offer much insight into the investigation. His demeanor did not align with that of a probable killer, especially considering he was on the opposite side of the country at the time of the murders. They initially excluded him as a suspect, and Vincent also provided receipts confirming purchases made on the days surrounding the tragedy, solidifying his absence from Bakersfield, California, where the horrific events unfolded. However, Detective Watts still had doubts. He noticed that Vincent never asked about how his wife and children died on July 11, 2003. Vincent Brothers returned to Los Angeles, but was notably absent from his family's memorial service. However, on July 16, 2003, he attended their funeral. As the police investigated further, they discovered that Vincent had moved out from his family's residence in April 2003 and was no longer living with them. His wife, Joni, had been planning a second divorce and intended to seek child support for their children. Authorities also uncovered Vincent's history of violence against women, leading to a closer scrutiny of his alibi. Further scrutiny revealed surveillance videos from store checkouts depicting Melvin, not Vincent, making purchases. Confronted with this evidence, Melvin disclosed that Vincent instructed him to visit various stores at specific times, using Vincent's name instead of his own. Police could not locate any witnesses who had seen Vincent during the tragic period. According to Melvin and the family, they had not encountered Vincent from the evening of July 4th to the evening of July 7th. Despite their efforts, authorities lacked direct evidence linking Vincent to the murders. Vincent Brothers had rented a Dodge Neon upon his arrival in Columbus, Ohio, and stayed at his brother's house. According to police speculations, Vincent allegedly flew to Columbus on July 2, 2003, under the pretense of visiting family. On July 4th, he purportedly traveled back from Ohio to Bakersfield, where the tragic incident occurred on the afternoon of Sunday, July 6, 2003. Afterward, he returned to Ohio, arriving late on Monday the 7th. Law enforcement meticulously examined the Dodge, focusing on its radiator and air filters. The Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis, was enlisted for assistance, with Dr. Lynn Kimsey, an expert in bug identification, meticulously analyzing insects found in the car. Dr. Kimsey's examination unveiled over 100 insects, meticulously identified by species, notably some exclusive to the western region beyond the Rockies. Certain insects indicated that Vincent traveled at night, Through careful analysis, she charted a path indicating the car's westward journey from Ohio. Investigators tracked down the vehicle's previous 5 renters, confirming that none had driven the car to California or near the Rockies. In their scrutiny of evidence from the home, the police focused on photographic evidence and observed a latex glove tip among items discarded in the laundry room. Upon testing, the tip revealed a DNA match, identifying it as a 1 in 6 billion match to Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent planned to leave town. He had started selling his possessions and even listed his house for sale. Consequently, on April 30th, 2004, Vincent was arrested and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution theorized that Vincent's motive for the murders was financial, contending that he acted out of fear of potential child support payments due to Joni's impending divorce. They portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who would disappear for long periods and often respond violently when questioned, particularly towards his wife or girlfriend at the time. Numerous witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, were summoned by the prosecution. Kimsey testified that the insects discovered in the Dodge Neon were consistent with those typically found along Interstate 70 while traveling. Testimony further corroborated that the 5,424 miles driven from July 2nd to July 11th aligned with the presented evidence. However, when Melvin testified, he attempted to retract his previous statements, claiming that he had lied to the police regarding Vincent providing him with a credit card to use. The defense countered by presenting an expert in high-speed driving. The expert asserted the difficulty of maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour throughout the journey from Ohio to California. They contended that such a trip would have been impossible for Vincent to accomplish. Additionally, their own pathologists took the stand, testifying that the murders likely occurred as late as Monday morning on July 7, 2003. To support their case, the defense presented interrogation tapes intended to demonstrate that Melvin had been coerced by the police into altering his testimony. They also brought forth a witness to a car incident that Vincent claimed occurred on Sunday morning. In this incident, a boy on a bicycle collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. While this incident was not reported to the police due to a lack of damages or injuries, the prosecution diligently sought to verify the bike accident story. Detective Watts traveled back to Ohio and located Tamba Leby, a car dealer who flew to California to testify. Leby confirmed that he was driving during the bike accident and that the boy collided with his car while he was stationary at an intersection. The defense strategy involved presenting Vincent's other brother, Troy, as Vincent's alibi witness. Troy was intended to testify that he had flown in from New York and spent that Saturday and Sunday with Vincent, touring different state colleges in Ohio. Vincent had expressed interest in applying to these colleges to further his graduate studies. However, complications arose when, after lunch on the day Troy was scheduled to testify, he was nowhere to be seen. Consequently, Vincent himself took the stand, vehemently denying any extramarital affairs and adamantly refuting the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent frequently broke down in tears. The prosecution brought in Franklin School principal Carla Toya as a witness. She testified about her involvement with Vincent, dating back to the year his son was born in 1996, and their on and off relationship until 2002, when she ended it. Toya then confessed that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, contradicting Vincent's staunch denial of previous affairs. This revelation undermined Vincent's claims of fidelity. The prosecution posited that the crime had been meticulously premeditated, acquiring knowledge of the family's Sunday routine, granting the killer control and a window of opportunity. Exploiting this familiarity, the perpetrator waited until the family was asleep, using a copied key to gain entry through the sliding glass door and methodically execute each member of the family on May 15th, 2017, Vincent Brothers was found guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, making him eligible for the death penalty. After hearing testimony from 137 witnesses, the jury deliberated for nearly 2 days before reaching their decision. Following the verdict, Vincent was escorted from the courtroom and returned to Lero Detention Facility under strict security. On September 27, 2007, Judge Michael Bush of the Door County Superior Court sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection. He was detained at San Quentin State Prison in California, where he is still currently housed. During the sentencing hearing, family members were given the opportunity to deliver statements. Vincent's only surviving child, his firstborn, Margaret Kern Brothers, announced her resignation from the Brothers family, expressing that upon leaving the courtroom, she would solely identify herself as Margaret Carr. The evidence suggested that Vincent Brothers lacked empathy and remorse for his actions, a common trait in what many call a psychopath. His perception of his children as mere objects indicated a complete detachment from any emotional connection with them. The act of stabbing Joni appeared to be a deliberate means of severing his ties with her on a physical level. His action of covering the victims seemed to indicate an attempt to shield himself from confronting the aftermath of his deeds, suggesting a deeply personal involvement in these killings. It is a tragic and unfortunate reality that the victims faced against this monstrous individual. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were tragically cut short, and the loved ones they left behind.
The case of Sheila LaBarre, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others. But sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Raine believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book, Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila LaBarre. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila LaBarre was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila LaBarre? Sheila LaBarre was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel from an early age forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice, adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, LeBar, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strazoot filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively, but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners, both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill LeBar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon LeBar invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself LeBar. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men, whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, but soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila for the first time didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill LeBar died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure, and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger, and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. It got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch, LeBar, constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable, and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire, and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, Labar met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael Delage. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael Delage disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and Labar remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy Labar was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at Labar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find Lévesque at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings. But that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Delage, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made, a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since Lévesque's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder, as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court, who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Ennis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. Lévesque in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility.